Elden Ring offers a lot of content in just one simple, amazing package, and that's already obvious from the very beginning with a large selection of classes that you can choose from the very start. There are 10 of these in total in the game, covering pretty much any playstyle and then some, and having so many options could prove to be quite a daunting task, especially for newcomers. And that is why in this video we're gonna take a look at all of the classes, playing by their biggest strengths and weaknesses in the hopes to see which ones are better suited for you. Now, to mark this amazing release, I'm also doing another giveaway for a free copy of Elden Ring on a platform of your choice. Being subscribed to the channel is obviously the only requirement, and you can find all of the information in the pinned comment and the description down below. Now, before proceeding, I have a small disclaimer, and it's good to know that the term class in the context of Elden Ring mostly just refers to the starting stats and gear. Eventually, you can freely diverge and create your own builds as you level up, but obviously starting strong is a huge benefit. Let's begin with the Vagabond. This is your go-to sword and shield tank class, and Souls fans will feel right at home playing this class, but newcomers should also feel right at home because this is also one of the most forgiving starting classes in Elden Ring. It comes with the highest number of points into vigor of all classes, so that's going to be 15, giving it a massive HP pool right from the very beginning. Its generous point distribution into strength and dexterity, which is 14 and 13 respectively, means you can wield almost any type of melee weapon right from the very start. But there are also some downsides. With a lower FP pool and limited access to magic attributes, this means you'll have to work extra hard if you want to add some spells into the mix, and that is why you're probably going to want to just stick to the strengths of this class, which consists into that massive HP and the great melee wielding stats. Now, the class also starts with a longsword, a heater shield, and a halberd. Quick tip: if you don't want to fat roll at the start, you can quickly unequip the halberd until you have enough points into endurance to roll with all of these equipped at the same time. Moving on to number 2, let's talk about the warrior, and the class that I would normally recommend to somebody who's a bit at a more intermediate level in the Souls genre. It's not 100% mandatory, but being a bit more skillful at the game and especially nailing the dodging and timing of your attacks will definitely prove quite useful. The warrior heavily favors dexterity, which makes it a perfect couple with the 2 scimitars that you already come equipped with at the start of the game. Now, these can either be dual wielded or used in conjunction with a small leather shield, but the swords are definitely the highlight here. They are as fast as they are devastatingly deadly, and when I first started playing it, I really appreciated the insane damage that the warrior can deal very early on in the game. There's quite a few points into mind too, about 12 of these, meaning that you can also add some spells into the mix with a slightly higher mana pool. But despite all of these, there's also a few drawbacks. Your starting medium armor and low vigor means that you have little HP and defenses from the very start, meaning that you will get heavily punished if you're not being careful, and especially so with the dodging and the positioning. The small shield also won't help much into blocking, but it can do a rather okay job at parrying. Not the best, but it's something. Finally, despite the class having some points into mind, at the start of the game you could not care less about them since you don't really have any meaningful magical abilities anyway. Still, it can always be transitioned into something really great, which is why warrior can definitely be a good starting class if you like a lot of damage. Moving on to number 3, let's talk about the hero, which is quite similar to the Vagabond, except it favors strength a lot more at the cost of some dexterity and just a little bit of HP. It also comes with light armor instead of the heavy like the Vagabond, but that also means you're going to be able to dodge a lot quicker and easier. Now, if you wanted a Vagabond class to move faster and deal more damage and still defend itself, then the hero is probably the class for you. What I really appreciated early on was the fact that you get to start with a battle axe. That's a really fast and strong weapon that can immediately deal a lot more damage than the Vagabond. So that's why, in my opinion, the hero was a better solution for me, but of course you're free to choose something else. Just know that it's another melee oriented class, meaning that it has limited points into magic, and even more so, it still has no access to any ranged capabilities like some of the other classes that I will talk about in just a little bit. This brings us to number 4, to the samurai class, a new one revealed not too long ago, and it kinda bypasses some of the restrictions and shortcomings of some of the previous melee classes I was talking about. Remember how previously I said that the other classes lacked ranged weapons? Well, the samurai does not, because it comes equipped with a longbow and quite a number of good arrows from the very beginning, meaning that you're both prepared for close range and long range as well. and trust me, the game will punish you heavily from long range early on as well. But you get access to some other very powerful tools from the very beginning. One of them is the Uchi Katana, which makes a comeback from the previous Souls games, and it's still as devastating as always. I really felt in love with this one in the game. It works really well, and you can combine it with a small shield that you also start with when you get the Samurai. So it gives you right enough survivability and plenty of damage, but also some nice tricks in there to take down enemies in surprising ways. Did I also mention how badass the Samurai looks with the starting gear that it has? Because it definitely does. As far as its stats goes, it definitely favors dexterity from the very beginning, having about 15 points into that, with some extra points going into health and stamina so that you're not completely undefended. But moving on to number 5, let's talk about some spellcaster classes, starting things off with the Astrologer, which is the pure mage class version of Elden Ring. Lots of points into mind, about 15 is what you get at the start, which means a lot more mana for you. You also get about 16 points into intelligence and quite a bit for dexterity as well. At the same time, this is the class with the lowest starting HP and defenses in the game, meaning that your positioning again has to be on point. Now your starting gear includes a staff that will let you cast spells, and you get access to 2 of these from the very beginning. One of them is called the Glintstone Pebble, which is a more single target spell, and then you have the Glintstone Arc, which is more AoE oriented. But on top of that, you also get a short sword and a small shield in case you don't have enough mana or want to like just switch things up. And despite being a complete glass cannon and most people recommending this to like more advanced players, I found the Astrologer to make things a lot easier for me in some of the starting encounters compared to some of the other starting classes that were deemed to be quote-unquote better. And that's because you're dealing so much damage with the spells. It's true that they are not as strong as they were in the beta, they seem to be slightly nerfed, but they are still overwhelmingly powerful. So if you have no trouble positioning, strategizing and dodging at the right time, this can be the class for you, even more so with the reworked spellcasting in Elden Ring that makes just spellcasting in general a lot more viable, but I would also argue a lot flashier and interesting than any other class so far. The next one is going to be the Prophet, which is another magic type class that focuses this time around on incantations rather than sorcery compared to astrologers. Now just like the Astrologer, the Prophet also comes with higher mind stats, but instead of intelligence, this time around you get more points into faith so that you can use those incantations instead of the sorcery spells. And that's because you also start with 2 really powerful spells. One of them is a heal ability that you cast with a 2-finger weapon, and the other one is going to be an ability that just sets enemies on fire. Now the only downside here I can think of is the fact that you have to be really close range with most incantation spells to affect enemies because they only work on short range. The Prophet also comes with another advantage, which is its access to a spear, meaning that you can keep enemies at the bay and especially further away from you in case you want to like cast spells. But I found the spear to be an amazing tool to also stun enemies and quickly follow up with a very strong, like in this case, fire attack that almost instantly one-shots anything. Now moving on to number 7, let's talk about a few hybrid classes, starting with the Confessor. It comes with a rather good point distribution into mind, having 13 points into that, strength and dexterity 12 points each, and faith about 14 points into that. If you're looking for a hybrid that uses either strength or dexterity with faith, then this is going to be the class for you. Your starting weapons are going to be the Finger Seal, which gives you access to an urgent heal and an Assassin's Approach spell. It also gives you access to a board sword and a kite shield, and I'm a huge fan of that sword because of its like heavy attack, both the jumping and the normal one, especially since instead of doing a pierce, you're doing kind of like a cross slash that does a really good job at staggering enemies, opening them up for a huge incoming attack. And on top of that, I'm also a fan of the Assassin's Approach, which works better than I expected. It includes a silence option, which is going to make your footsteps silent, but also reduces fall damage momentarily, meaning that you can pretty much run in the back of the enemy, not crouch, and they will never hear you coming. So you can also kind of like assassinate them while running, which is really useful. But coming up to number 8, another hybrid class like the Confessor, which actually favors more dexterity and intelligence, is going to be the Prisoner. Your starting weapons with this one will include a rapier, a staff, a shield, and of course the really awesome Glint Blade ability. Now the sword sword being a piercing type might not be on everybody's liking, but I like it. Its slightly longer reach means you can, well, reach enemies, and it also has another great jumping power attack where you can knock down enemies, but probably not on the same scale as the previous Confessor shield. On top of that, it's also quite good in the magic department because it comes, as I've said, with the glint blade. I really can't stress how amazing this ability is and how much I love it early on. Even in the detriment of an Astrologer, I would rather go with a prisoner and maybe create a hybrid because I like that ability so much. So it's a really awesome one. Of course, does have its downsides with low HP, but still probably a little bit better than some of the previous options. Moving on to number 9, let's talk about the Bandit, one of the last classes in the game. It heavily favors dexterity and arcane, having 13 and 14 points into that respectively. It's also quite a niche class, and I would recommend starting with this one if you're very skillful at the game, and that's mostly because of your starting stats and gear. Your starting equipment consists of a knife, a buckler shield, and a short bow. Now the upsides of having these is as follows. Having access to a buckler means you have the best parry window in the game, and parries are very strong. You can quickly follow up with a devastating attack even against most of the bosses in the game. The downside of this is that it can be quite inconsistent, and personally I'm not a fan of the mechanic, but that's probably because I just suck. Another one is the fact that you get access to the short bow, helping you a ton with ranged damage early on, and the higher arcane levels means you have better chances at better loot even from the very start. Another downside is the fact that it's a very squishy class that also deals very little damage with normal attacks from the knife, so these setups with the parry windows is what you will want to play with at the start of the game, but as I've said, they can be quite difficult for an early on player. And this brings us to the Wretch, the final one. It's not really a class as much as it is just a blank slate that you can build upon. It comes with precisely the exact same point distribution into all of the stats, meaning that you can start fresh and build however you want, but at the same time you will have quite a big disadvantage at first. No weapons, no starting equipment, you have to worry about all of the stuff that you don't have, which other classes have. So again, this is something that somebody who's a pro at the game would probably start with, so they can build from that point on. And this is it with the classes. Let me know which one you went with, and of course I'll see you guys in the next video.